Oh, yeah. So here we go. The 15-minute cities are on, baby. Let me just tell you, Maui gave us a preview. LA kicks it into the next gear. It's not just coming, it's upon us. You better know that during the Trump presidency, no matter what's going on there in Washington and beyond, they're not playing. They're very, very excited about 15-minute cities. Agenda 2030 is not going away. And I'm going to show you today that Gavin Newsom has made it very clear. He's put out the narrative, what is coming. LA 2.0 is a 15-minute city. 15-minute cities are coming to a city near you. They are determined. Who knows what's going to happen? We're going to break it down today. Let's go. All right, so let's get into this tonight or today, a Saturday afternoon, high noon here in Alabama. But yeah, so, Gavin Newsom just went to Washington and met with new president, number 47, y'all, who is disrupting the world right now, just shutting things down left and right. And, of course, his first trip that he took was to North Carolina just shortly after being sworn in. And then he went to L.A., and then y'all know, if y'all remember the spanking that he did there when he was in L.A., just called them out to their faces and basically told them, we're going to turn the water on. And, of course, he's turned the water on, and things are changing there. But do not fall victim to everybody just being blown away and being so excited about all the regulations that are being cut, all the fat that's being trimmed away in Washington, D.C., and the no-nonsense, common sense talk that's coming from this administration. These woke liberals are not going to go away easily. So let me just show you right here. So this is what L.A., if you live in California, if you know somebody that's in L.A., and quite frankly, any major city that's out there, certainly following any kind of disaster, you'll see, it's a little different in North Carolina, but you'll see some of the same things happening as North Carolina starts to rebuild as well. I want to show you that this week, Gavin Newsom went on CNN, and CNN asked the question about rebuilding L.A. Now, I'm going to show you, again, I'm going to remind you in just a moment, don't go anywhere. By the way, if you hadn't already done it, smash that like button right now. What are you waiting on? Smash it, smash it, smash it. Show some love on this Saturday afternoon or whenever you're watching this. Subscribe to our channel. We certainly do appreciate it. But let's watch his response to the question about rebuilding L.A. and what it's going to look like. Can we rebuild it the way it was?
You previously mentioned the timeline for rebuilding would be 6 to 9 months. Is that going to happen? And should people rebuild in some parts of California, given how high the fire risk is?
Yeah, you can't rebuild the same. So we have to rebuild with science. We have to build with climate reality in mind.
Now, I'm gonna restart this, but I wanted to stop there and make sure you heard that because it happened so quick. His words was, you can't rebuild the same way. You can't rebuild the same way. When we rebuild, we have to rebuild with climate in mind. Then he says, these houses were built, some of these in the 20s and 30s and 40s. We live in a different world. We have to build and rebuild with climate in mind. I'm going to restart it.
You previously mentioned the timeline for rebuilding would be 6 to 9 months. Is that going to happen? And should people rebuild in some parts of California, given how high the fire risk is?
You can't rebuild the same. So we have to rebuild with science. We have to build with climate reality in mind. We have to look at infrastructure, redundancy, systems, ingress, egress as it relates to emergency management and planning, materials. All of that is being reviewed and reconsidered, and with the latest iterations in terms of understanding and technology. And I say technology in the context of how, again, we build the infrastructure to keep it safe, to address undergrounding of lines, how we address the larger issues of redundancy in terms of systems. There's a new reality, the world we're living in. And if you're not believing science, you have to believe your own eyes, your own lived experience. And the reality is the insurance market understands it better than anyone else. The market and Mother Nature's are going to have to change the way we live and do business in the context of how we plan, how we do land use, zoning into the future along the lines of your question. We have to wake up to this reality. We cannot be in denial about what's going on with Mother Nature, again, around the globe, not just
so
in the state of California.
Just to sort of pin you down on, what does that mean for the rebuilding in some of these high-risk areas?
Just more sophisticated design and planning. Remember, Altadena, many of those homes were done in the 20s and 30s and 40s for a world that no longer exists from a climate perspective. And so the ability to absorb a deeper understanding as you rebuild it presents itself anew in a profound and we hope impactful way. So I'm concerned about it, but I'm not concerned about our resourcefulness to address it with the most modern standards anywhere in the world. By the way, California leads the nation already in building zoning standards. Our ability now to take it to the next level, to be a model for the rest of the country, presents itself.
No, Mr. Gavin Newsom, you lead the nation as a model for liberal agendas and wokeness and all of that. But y'all, if you didn't hear that, let me just review here. We're going to rebuild with climate in mind. We can't rebuild without science, climate, and understanding. We live in a different world. Then he talked about redundancies. He talked about basically what he's talking about was the power grid. You have to rebuild so they don't put so much pressure on the power grid. He made it very, very clear that you're not going to be able to rebuild your house the way it was. You're going to have different materials. It's got to be they're going to be smaller, and everybody's not going to get a building permit. We knew this was coming. He made it very clear when he talked about shortly after the fire started, while they were still raging, Gavin Newsom said, I want to remind you that he is already, this is why the fires were still raging, is early on in the fires. He's already reimagining LA 2.0 post-wildfire, and that California needs a Marshall Plan to rebuild. He goes on to say that he's organizing a Marshall Plan. I believe I have a video. Let me see if I've got a video in this one. I know I've got one in the next article. Let me just go ahead and play this video, then we'll come back to the article, because this article is about this response while the fires were still raging.
Governor Gavin Newsom, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good to be with you.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
6 different wildfires.
And I have the volume maxed out. So this is just the volume of this video. I'm sorry.
Raging right now. Do you have the resources to combat all these fires at this hour?
Yeah, we got 14,000 people working the line right now. We doubled the National Guard. We have 1,680 out there helping on the logistics side. I was just with folks from Mexico, 73 folks. They'll be relieving some of our hand crews. We've got 9 states that are now providing under this EMAC system support. So we've got the resources, but we have more important, we have the winds that have changed, and that allows us to be more resourceful with existing resources, particularly the aerial resources.
What's the mission of the National Guard here in Southern California?
Combination of factors. We have the rattlesnake teams that are doing the line and working with the hand crews. We have other logistics packages happening. And we saw our first MAFs, which are these folks that are doing retardant, which are military planes, and the guards leading that operation. So it's a combination of all those factors. And of course, fundamentally, 600 plus, just focusing on looting and making sure there's law and order on the streets.
Well, there goes, I may as well acknowledge it. There goes another one of your choppers. How many aircraft do you have deployed right now?
There's
So it's a long interview, but this sort of sums it up here. This is as a result of that interview with NBC. As the devastating wildfires in Los Angeles continue to rage, Governor Newsom is looking forward to rebuilding an LA 2.0 post-fire. Newsom was asked in that interview that I just showed you, NBC Meet the Press, you can find it. It's like a 13 or 14-minute video. Saturday, if California would be ready to host the World Cup, the Super Bowl, and the Olympics over the next couple of years in the aftermath of the wildfire. Speaking against the backdrop of a fire-ravaged neighborhood, Newsom said that he's already organizing a Marshall Plan. You remember Marshall Plan was the rebuilding of infrastructure in places that we destroyed in world wars. Then we came back in and rebuilt the cities that we destroyed. Has already had a team looking and reimagining LA 2.0. And how ironic is it that he chose Marshall Plan, because that's basically designed to rebuild things that you destroyed. You can read into that whatever you want to read into. The Marshall Plan harkens back to the post-World War II period when President Truman signed Economic Recovery Act of 1948. The act saw more than $13 billion invested in rebuild Western Europe's economies, not just what we destroyed, obviously, but bringing investments into the region and stimulating the U.S. economy by building a market for American goods. When asked for the details of the new Marshall Plan, Newsom said he was talking to city, civic, business, nonprofit, and labor leaders about recovery efforts and working towards galvanizing the community. We've got to be thinking 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years ahead. At the same time, we're focusing on the immediate, which is life, safety, and property. Newsom said that the wildfires will likely be one of the worst natural disasters in the country's history. It's going on to be claimed and proclaimed to be the world's the worst natural disaster in our history. Now, keep in mind that shortly after all of that hullabaloo, more than hullabaloo, it was a disaster, but I'm speaking specifically of the fact that it was revealed shortly after the fires began that the reservoirs were empty, the water was basically turned off, and that many fire hydrants had no water pressure. And the firemen were saying that it was revealed that the woke statuses, the DEI hirings and all this had taken millions and millions of dollars away from the fire department, put towards LGBT and other things that were going on during that time, drag shows and all kinds of stuff, making sure we had enough lettered people in positions of authority and working for the fire department and so forth. Well, shortly after that, Trump was sworn in. And his first trip, I believe he was sworn in. Of course, he was sworn in on that Monday. And I believe that Friday, before the week even ended, he was in California. And, of course, he had several major news-making statements that he made there. And, started off by the fact that Newsom's out on the tarmac waiting on him to get off the plane. And supposedly the narrative is Trump didn't even know he was out there and made him wait for like 20 minutes, standing there by himself. And then he came out there and shook his hand, pulled him in like he did, and they had a few comments there, and then Newsom was not anywhere to be found after that. Well, Newsom has now since had several phone calls and has went to Washington and requested money. Well, Donald Trump has said, we're going to turn the water on. He's already went out there and done that, opened up the spigots. They're supposed to be having, as we speak, we got several people that live in California. You can let me know, but I believe today or sometime this week, you're supposed to have flooding rains, and they're concerned about mudslides. They're concerned about all this. Remember, we had record rainfall about a year ago, and they just let it run right into the ocean. First of all, we're praying for the safety of the residents of the fire-ravaged areas, because once it's devastated by fire, the next danger is, of course, mudslides. So we're praying against mudslides, but we're also praying that maybe this time the water will not run into the ocean, that it will actually be captured for future events, and even the water supply for the farmers and everything else that's needed there. But in the middle of all of it, just if you needed further evidence that they are going full steam ahead with their agenda, no matter the disaster, no matter who's in the White House, or at least they think they're going full steam, this might have slipped by you. But while the fires were raging, the House and Senate of the state of California met for an emergency meeting, a special session that was called by Gavin Newsom, not to fight wildfires, not to fight homeless, get the homeless off the street, or to veterans benefits, but a special session for a bill to be passed called an anti-Trump or a Trump fighting bill. That's all it was. And they come together and voted in favor of a $50 million fight Trump, anti-Trump bill. And he signed it into law. Governor Gavin Newsom, let's see when the date on this is, February 7th, yesterday. California Governor Gavin Newsom signed 2 bills Friday providing $50 million to fight President Donald Trump's policies, after returning from a trip to Washington where he was seeking federal aid for recent wildfires in his state. Both bills were passed after a special legislative session called by Newsom after the election to prepare California to lead the opposition to the second-term administration. Newsom and the Democrat-controlled legislature reached the deal to fund the anti-Trump effort, even as the Palisade Fire and Eaton Fire were still smoldering in Los Angeles. One bill, SBX 11, provides for additional funding to be made available to the Department of Justice for litigation challenges of federal policy. The other, SB X12, provides funding for legal services to vulnerable persons at risk of detention, deportation, or eviction. In other words, to illegal aliens, both who were introduced by State Senator Scott Wiener from San Francisco. The bills were passed earlier this week, and Newsom waited until his visit in Washington was over and until Friday afternoon, when many people have left work and are less likely to notice the news, to sign the spending into law. In a signing statement attached to SBX 1 and 2, Newsom says that none of the funding will be used for illegal immigrants convicted of serious or violent felonies. However, nothing in the text of the bill says that. Newsom is seeking billions of dollars in federal aid to clean up and rebuild devastated communities. Breitbart News made the point during President Trump's visit to Pacific Palisades that the administration should appoint a special master along the lines of the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund to ensure that California spends any aid properly, given that the state believed it had money available to spend on fighting Trump. So you've got money, you've got $50 million that you can just set aside of taxpayer money, California citizens' money, to just be used to fight Donald Trump. But then you're going to ask Donald Trump for billions of dollars to rebuild. And if you came in late, we started by saying he told CNN this week, you cannot rebuild the same way. We will not permit, basically what he was saying, for you to rebuild your house any way you want to rebuild your house, even if we let you rebuild your house. If we do, you're going to have to agree to his words, not mine. Make sure you build with science in mind, with climate in mind. And he made a point for at least 2 or 3 times that I counted. Mother Nature. He said the words Mother Nature. We have to converse with, if you will, Mother Nature to see what is best for her and not for the citizens. So that's the world we live in. I want to remind you that it is early in 2025. It is less than 5 years from Agenda 2030 that was supposed to be in place. Agenda 2030 has been talked about and has been a goal. How many news articles have you heard on this program and other programs that say when the elite talk about what they want to do to the world and how they want to change the world, the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, all these kind of things, how many of those news articles ends with their goal is to have this in place by 2030? 2030. We hear 2030 all the time. I mean, all the time. I would say when I'm covering this on The Big Picture, 75 to 80% of everything I ever cover on this channel, where it talks about the elite's plans for the future, it always ends with 2030. They have not given up on 2030, okay? And even though Donald Trump is just messing with their minds, y'all, they're losing their minds. It is crazy to see what's happening in Washington, D.C. today. We'll cover that in another show, but they're like, okay, you do what you want to do there, but our goal for a world change is not going away. Agenda 2030 is still coming. And those 17 sustainable goals, you need to do a Google search on the 17 sustainable goals of Agenda 2030 and read every one of them. And I'm telling you, of the 17, probably 9 or 10 of them specifically address climate, the climate religion, and that we cannot live in the future with the freedoms that we are accustomed to today. And that is what Gavin Newsom is saying. Gavin Newsom is calling it LA 2.0. And you think for a minute that by the time the Olympics get here, that Los Angeles is going to look anything like it used to look? No way, no way. And even the ones that get permits to rebuild, their houses are going to be smaller. They're going to have the properties in between them are going to have to be bought out, turned into greenlands, wetlands, whatever you want to call it, a special area for a certain type of animal or something like that. It's not going to be the same. And they're going to try, and as crazy as this sounds, to turn parts of LA and other places like Maui, and even they're going to try to even do it in North Carolina and Georgia and some other places that was devastated by Hurricane Helene. You're going to begin to see that on the tail end of every natural disaster that hits this country and other countries around the world, you're going to see the rebuilding of those areas look completely different, because what the plans that they have for me and the plans that they have for you do not equal the plans that they have for themselves, because they'll rebuild their houses any way they can. By the way, most fires will never even make it to their homes. But if they do, guess what they do? They go get an island, they go buy an island, and they go to live in an underground bunker, because they know something big is coming. Something big is coming. And it ain't what they think. It might be part of what they think, but all that's leading to something big coming. And that's Jesus. That's the biggest thing, and he's coming, and your heart better be right with God. Thank you for joining me for this short Saturday just reminder of the world that we live in. No matter what's going on in Washington, and there's some great things going on in Washington, some chaos going on in Washington, but the world is not slowing down their agenda. So don't go to sleep. Don't be lulled to sleep, and don't be distracted. We got work to do. God bless you. We'll see you next time with a big picture where we ain't woke. We certainly are awake. God bless.
Would you like to help us build the big picture family? We're on a mission to wake up the world to what is really going on. All you have to do is go to our website at LarryRagland.com and make a one-time gift, or you can become a monthly partner. Any amount is a blessing and an encouragement to us. While you're there, make sure you get a copy of our book, I See Greatness in You. Browse our merchandise store, connect with us on our social media links, and join our mailing list. We appreciate it. And remember, we ain't woke, but we are certainly awake.